bike.
A
Pick
bike?
a bike.
I want a bike.
You want a bike? Oh, bikes are good, man. Should always get a bike.
I go for some biking right about now.
Yeah. It rained earlier here, so it's all blue.
I'm waiting for rain here. Anyway,
Want rain over there.
it'll rain. We'll get rain. It'll happen eventually.
That's the dream.
It is. Speaking of rain, hi guys. We are underwater.
Yeah. That's what I noticed.
Fantastic. And it sounds fantastic.
Yes.
The sound of being underwater sounds fantastic. I don't know about y'all, but like I get really nervous. Well, I get nervous at deep water anyway.
Would you rather be out in a blazing sunlight getting dehydrated or be underwater in a cool pool?
Definitely in the blazing sunlight.
Yeah, I was gonna say
I
heat
am-
tolerance.
I am terrified of deep water.
So it depends on the deep water. Are we talking like swamp deep water or like pool deep water?
Yeah, I meant like a shallow pool.
Okay, all right. Now that
Um,
yeah, we've got something.
yeah. Shallow pool is nice.
Sunbro and Bonnie, welcome. And anybody else
Oh.
that ends up watching eventually, welcome. We're gonna be talking about books.
Books.
We're gonna talk books. With us we have Yang, who has been getting progressively harder to find these days.
I really wish I wasn't super hard to find, but things seem to happen every single time I want to be on Discord.
It's all right. It's gonna happen to me here relatively soon too.
Yes.
And we have Midnight. Shh, nobody say anything. Say anything. And then we have Pico.
I am Midnight until she gets into voice chat, and then
You
I
know,
am
you have experience with being Midnight.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have a lot of experience with being Midnight. So it's all good. But I wanted to do a bit of a stream on this the reading list, mainly because it's important for any arts field. It's really important for any sciences field too. And it's something that often gets overlooked. And I'm just going to preface this now by saying the intention this evening is not to get into the arguments about what's better, physical or digital. It's physical. But
He's right.
but I wanted to do at least some kind of a talk on books that beneficial, how to tell if a book is beneficial, and basically also try and take a look and see if we can figure out some of the ways to discern a good research book from a bad research book. Because I don't know, certainly all of us here, but some of you in chat, some of you in VODs, if you haven't been to college before, or you're going into college, one of the things you might not have heard of is that there is such a thing as good research and bad research. Not all of these books are going to be created equal. Some of them are, well, they might as well be fodder for your fireplace. Some of them, it's true. It's a painful thing, but it is true. But others are fantastic, and they set the standard. So we're going to kind of look at I'll try and come up with a couple of examples, but we're going to take a look at that tonight. And I figured what better way to do that than with our resident teacher and with the resident writer, although the resident writer isn't here presently. She'll be in shortly. So
Hold on. So we have the resident teacher,
Hmm.
I have the resident historian, resident
that?
bot. Aren't you a resident historian?
I don't
Sir.
know.
Sir.
I don't know.
Chat, he's the resident historian. Let him know that.
For
He's
the
great
record,
at it.
for the record, Big Rev Kev is a much better historian than I am. Okay. He is a much better historian than I am. So.
But he is not on the voice chat right now.
Yeah,
So-
that's true. But yeah, he's a much better historian than I am. Tried doing a college paper on ninjas and I couldn't find anything because they're fucking ninjas. Sounds about right. that tracks. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways that you can gauge good text from bad text. There's also things that you should just absolutely always have. And then I figured we'd also share a few things off of our reading lists later on tonight too. So this could be one of the shorter ones, or it could be one of the longer ones. It kind of depends on you, chat.
Yeah, because honestly, I'm gonna be honest for a second. Book reading, I don't see very often anymore, especially for like younger people, where it's more everyone's like online more, everyone's looking more at social media, and young adult media like Harry Potter and stuff is what they read. And it makes sense that like nonfiction is not as popular for younger people at times, but I guess I don't see too much of young adults reading nonfiction like these days, if that makes sense.
It really does make sense. It's a change that has happened a little bit more recent, at least recent in my opinion. It's been more recent. We were still, who needs books when there's TikToks? But really that's kind of where we're going. But one of the scary things, I think, is the fact that we are kind of going this direction, and the terrifying thing about it is that's education. That's if you're not reading the source material, if you're not reading the proper material, if you're not reading into anything, you're not learning anything. So, I have a distinctive problem with that. But what I pulled up on stream here, I know it's bright. I apologize. Also, I'm not sure if stream is capturing the fact that it's an HDR, so it might look a little bit weird and washed out. But this is kind of an example of what some of my rating lists look like. And one of the things that I always look for are things. It's this thing that we call survey. Survey means something a little bit different in academics than it does when you hear it out in the wild. So out in the wild, you hear survey, you're just like, oh no, I rate it 1 out of 10. When we talk about survey in academics, we're talking about it covers everything. So surveys are good places to start normally, but you can also find yourself getting lost in the weeds on them. Now, when you're reading a textbook in class,
don't judge me. Food.
When you're reading a textbook in class, most of the time you're reading survey text.
Yeah.
One of the problems with that is that inevitably a student is going to come along and they're going to cite the ever-living hell out of that survey text and think that it counts.
Oh man.
And that's the only thing that they're going to cite. Little do they understand that the survey text is literally what Wikipedia should be. So, I know, Sumi, you didn't interrupt. Don't worry. But thank you for the 6 months. My gosh. But we also do now have midnight here.
It's midnight.
Yeah. I finally made it. I just got back from like my errands.
Ah, well, glad you made it.
Where's my
I
booze?
know. Oh, sorry.
See.
It's a book stream, not a booze stream. Unless
Well,
you did
See,
books
Yang
and
gets
booze.
it.
Those go together, don't they?
I mean, they can
Booze,
sometimes.
Hello.
Yeah.
No, I
Um,
heard Wikipedia, and I was just having a conversation with a friend the other day. I was like, Wikipedia is a good resource, but it's not a good source.
Correct. And really and truly, what I've told students in the past is that Wikipedia is your survey textbook that you are assigned in class. That's what Wikipedia should be. That's what it should look like. It should look like this. If I catch you citing anything off of Wikipedia, I will find you and I will punish you by charging you 3 times your tuition because you're apparently gullible enough to actually pay that. So, short version is, everybody who's reading things online, as Yang was saying at the beginning here, chances are they're probably reading off of Wikipedia, which is very, 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 very bad. But one of the other things too, that I wanted to point out here, I do, it's right here. So this is very much, if there is an engineer in here, like this kind of stuff would make you extremely excited. Historians, we call these primary documents.
I'm familiar with that term.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but engineers will also look at these and just froth at the mouth over these kinds of things. But some of the other things that I have, like in my library, for example, are what's called a technical manual or a technical report. And that's the last thing that generally most people ever want to read. Because a technical report is basically just a sea of technical data that's diarrheaed onto a piece of paper. And it's up to the reader what that information means. Now, the reason that I brought these up, there is a specific reason. And no, this wasn't in my original plan to talk about tonight, but Yang got me thinking about this. Is that, for example, we have a very, very relative thing that we can talk about in relation to technical data. What is that thing? Anybody have a guess on what the very pressing thing is that we've been talking about that might contain technical data?
I have a couple theories.
Go ahead.
It wouldn't happen to be COVID related, would it?
Oh, it most absolutely would be COVID related. Yeah, COVID-19. So, a lot of things that I've seen get brought up lately have to do with COVID data. And this kind of technical data here would literally prevent you from saying something stupid if you took the time to read it. But the problem is that you aren't required to read it to have an opinion on social media.
Yeah. You don't need a degree to be on Twitter.
That's right.
Degrees for Twitter? Since when?
So, the other thing too, and I'm not going to get into a debate about this, but I don't care what side you're on, both sides seem to have problems with this, is climate change is another one. People have a real hard time with actually taking in and looking at technical data. Now, there's 2 reasons that you want to take in technical data. The first reason is because you want to know what you're talking about. But the second reason is because you can have somebody who does have a degree in the field, but maybe they didn't graduate in the top of their class. So, one of the things that I've talked about a lot is people who have degrees that have the degree, but they weren't really checked against the grain. So you can be Dr. So-and-so, for example, and still not know what the hell you're talking about. So, yes, and it's been that way. I don't want to make it sound like that's a new phenomena. That's not.
No, and the thing is that I wouldn't. I believe that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's not a new phenomenon. But if you are proactive and you go out and you educate yourself on some of the information and you take a look at the technical data, you can start putting pieces together and you can make informed decisions and having intelligent conversations with people. And there is a distinct lack of that anywhere today. So I wanted to be sure that I pull out the technical library. And I'm not saying that you're going to be doing this on the day-to-day. If anybody ever tells you, well, no, I don't need to read the technical data to know X, Y, and Z is true. It's just a scientific consensus, or it's a historic consensus. Okay, well, give me the technical data. I will be the decision maker on that for me. But that's what you should do. So, sorry, that was a derail.
Nah, it's all good. Technical data is very important for understanding, like, the general data, like you said, because a lot of times we make conclusions from that data, and 9 times out of 10, if you actually read through it, you're able to make very fair conclusions that can lead to, I guess, problem solving or engineering a solution towards that conclusion. Whereas without those kinds of reports, we end up just making assumptions about certain causes and effects, which leads to incorrect conclusions, which leads to this whole chain of false things, and why we get 5G from COVID shots. Apparently.
I would also even add to that, not even just like misinformation, but very vague statements that lead to misinformation.
Straw man
Like
arguments.
I can tell you something is big, but if I don't tell you how big that thing is, well, how real is the threat?
Right.
Like a bee is big.
Yeah.
But how big is a bear?
Right. And see that kind of ties back into it too. But what I'm going to tie this back into is with regards to reading and books, is that where do those books come from? The good published material. And I feel so clever. Actually, I don't feel clever. This is exactly where I was going with this.
We'll give you clever
You're doing
points.
great.
Yeah. But the emphasis that I'm putting on the technical data here, a good academic writing, a good textbook is going to cite the ever-living shit out of that technical data. So when you are looking through and thumbing through your academic books, a good thing to look for is seeing what kind of technical data they pulled. Now, technical data isn't always going to look like what I had pulled up on screen there. You guys know I'm a military historian. Our technical data looks very basic. And that's a weird way to say. How can I phrase this differently? We can convert what our technical data looks like into a narrative. We can convert it into a narrative easily. In fact, a lot of our technical data is in narrative form. However, I will tell you right now, I've looked at technical data from, for example, the CDC. I've looked at technical data from NOAA. I've looked at all different types, and it isn't all created equal. It's going to display differently. It's going to take some interpretation. And I will tell you right now, too, I still don't understand half of the shit that I read in technical reports from the Army, but it's in a narrative form. So just keep that in mind. Don't rush to a conclusion. The world's not going to end tomorrow if you don't have a decision on where you stand on an issue tomorrow. And if it indeed does, if there is a decision that hangs in the balance, then chances are you probably should have been more proactive in doing your research to begin with. Paging every college kid ever. So I'm just saying, there's things to look for in the data that you're handling, the material that you're handling, and things like that. Now, one of the fantastic things here is I'm always concerned when I'm doing talks, because I come out of a very technical background, and I come out of a military background, and military, is different from the rest of the world, right? And
You
so
do have more information in certain fields
Yes.
versus the rest of us.
Well, and that's my problem is there's a detachment for me, and I always feel like half the time when I'm talking through some of this stuff, I'm forgetting how a person in the real world, and that's a knock at me. That's not a knock at anybody else. That's actually a knock at me. I forget how a person in the real world would actually see what's the so what to the somebody in the real world. So having Midnight and Yang come in here to kind of balance this thing where it's just like, okay, we are handling students and we are handling actual books. We're not handling, everything that's data, and the only person that's going to read it is a 2-star major general in the army, or some engineer that has 35 years worth of aerospace engineering and aeronautics degree. It's somebody that has a worldview outside of their cubicle, and it's not even necessarily a civvy's POV, because I'm a civvy, but it's a real world perspective. So I figured that both of you would be able to kind of fill in here. So what is good writing, I guess, is where I want to start with this. So to both of you, Midnight and Yang, and you both can take turns. What is good writing? What does it look like?
Good writing in what sense? Like information-wise,
So,
or just in general?
I would
Because
like
I see writing from two different standpoints. Because I do writing creatively, and I also look at them for like lesson building and stuff like that.
Yep.
So it depends on what you want to focus on.
I want you to tackle
Yeah.
both.
Okay.
Ooh.
So start with. I would actually start it with the information writing, and the reason I would start with that is because that information writing can be what helps you decide what, like, basic writings or methods and skills would actually be. It can help you set that standard and that tone.
Mhm.
So I would probably start with the more in-depth kind of stuff, like what kind of things do you look at when you're looking at building a lesson plan, and then when you put it out, what are some things that you personally try and make sure of when you're doing writing, keeping in mind that when I write, I'm writing as if it's somebody who's like 3 times smarter than I am, or a 5th grader. Those are the only 2
Mhm.
modes of writing that I have.
I was gonna say THK 5th graders older than what I teach, so
Exactly.
I work with so chat, for those who don't know, my degree is in early childhood education, which means I work with usually the really young youngsters.
The
We're talking
babies.
the babies, kindergarten, pre-K, first, second grade.
You ain't never had a
Um,
private first class around you, have you?
So one of the things that when we're talking about writing, for me, a lot of the writing is just, can they even write down letters? Can they even get the mechanics down?
Can they write the sentences?
Can they write the sentences? Can they go left to right? Can they capital letters? That's a big plus if they get it down. But the important thing when it comes to research for the youngsters, because the youngsters still do research. We have books in the classroom for different things. I think the most notable one in my head right now is Sea Animals, a while ago, where we had a whole unit on sea animals. We talked about dolphins, starfish, crabs, jellyfish. We talked about all these different kinds of animals. And one of the things that we teach at a young age is fiction books versus nonfiction. So when we give them a book, it's like, do you think this book could be real? Are the things presented in this book something that could happen in real life? For example, could a jellyfish and a regular fish become friends and talk to each other? And they were like, no, that can't happen. And we're like, yeah, good job. You know fact, you know fiction. They're right there.
I like how innocent you made that too, by the way.
Oh, there's definitely some things that are, we can't tell them. They will learn it one day when they're older.
One
get
day
there
they will.
eventually.
One day they will see.
They'll
The
see.
truth.
They will learn the
jel-
ways of the dark side.
But the jellyfish really be friends with the fish? I mean, the fish could be in the jellyfish's belly. They won't. We don't tell them that, but. So, then we read nonfiction texts to help them with their writing. So we'll read through a nonfiction book, their illustrations. Not really illustrations sometimes, it's more like photography in the book. And from there, we describe, so what do you see in this picture? What are the colors you see? Is it similar or different than what you saw in the fiction book? Some facts that you read. What do you think this could mean? If there's like a word that you think, and we practice context clues, which is something I think Sumbro mentioned earlier about context clues. That's a skill that we teach at an early age because let's be real, some people don't get context clues,
Oh god.
and it's
True.
kind of hard.
I still have that issue sometimes too.
Yeah, like I will read something, I'll be like, huh? What's the context clue? And then I have to read back to like, oh,
What did I just read?
it's like, huh? Thankfully, with children's books, it's like 5 sentences on the page.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, I got this. But it's these kind of skills that we teach at an early age. And so, I guess with technical data, there's not too much we could share with
No.
the little ones. It's the closest I can get is probably when you go into a math skill about surveys, where we're literally surveying how many kids like this kind of ice cream or how many kids have this kind of pet. But we use that data and we help them kind of think about, so we took some data, what do you notice about the chart? Who has more? Who has less? When you get to older kids, you talk about percentages. You can make conclusions about data based on those, like the raw data, of course. And
Well,
so,
And you would have seen data when you were going through your education and your background.
Yes.
And I want to be clear, there is data all around, but the thick data that makes up most of your research text, that is going to be stuff that's up there at the collegiate level. You're not.
oh, yeah.
I would love to see little Johnny's expression. Here, Johnny, take a look at these firing charts for
Cars.
M114 howitzer when there's a crosswind of 35 miles per hour.
God.
And tell
That's
me,
so intriguing.
tell me what the azimuth of the projectile is going to be.
Here,
You-
Timmy, here's the whole document about the Blackbird. I want you to read through it and see how the developments have changed throughout.
Yeah, take a look at this and tell us how much pressure goes into the freaking J57 engine when the speed and velocity exceeds 3,000 miles per hour at an elevation of 61,000 feet. You know, shit like that. No, little Timmy's not gonna. Little Timmy's gonna have enough trouble processing the ice cream cones. Who has what favorite ice cream cone?
Little Timmy's already gonna struggle with the number 3000. It feels, but I really think about it. If you go one-on-one with a student, you can adapt that kind of document for the little ones.
Oh yeah.
I think the thing is, this goes into like more education than reading and like data. It's just how to really teach something and really get them to think about it. It's easier to do it one-on-one where you're able to ask them questions to help them dig deeper and do critical thinking. But back to the whole thing about data and fiction, nonfiction. It really starts there, how we help students who gradually become civilians, who gradually become good citizens, hopefully.
Who gradually become civilians.
Who gradually, well, you know, like productive money earning civilians who how do we say this, don't
Boy.
fight when you can't get candy at the candy
Boy,
store.
I was about to say you're making some big assumptions there.
Listen, the children already love their candy, man. But
Oh no.
wait, where did my
yes.
train of thought go? Uh-oh.
Context.
Alright, hold on. Context clues. Fiction, nonfiction.
Yeah.
And how
we
that develops to good data versus how we end up with people who make very quick conclusions based on like one or two things they see.
So I'm interested in, and this would be more of a Midnight question. So Midnight is currently in the process of writing a novel, and it's going very well from what I hear, which congrats on that, because that's a big deal. So my question is I'm curious, what is necessarily your process when you're looking at things from a novel? Because I know what the process is for me. The process for me is that I'm going to inevitably come up right on a deadline. I'm going to send it to like 50 different people who are going to proof it. Of those 50 people, 30 of them will actually read it, and of those 30 people, 9 are going to send me back just nothing but a red sheet of paper. And then it has to go and be looked at and make sure that it's technically sound and all this stuff, and it's just wonderful. And I think I got dinged once because I didn't use an army punchline word. Apparently the term readiness needs to be used instead of getting ready. So things like that. But when you're writing, again, this is a real world thing. What is the general process that you're looking for that? What are things that you're looking for to make sure that that you get your audience? And I know you may not necessarily have a lot of background with it, but surely you have to have some thought in mind with that.
In terms of like audience stuff?
In terms of making sure that you are reaching the audience that you want, that you're conveying exactly what you mean, despite the fact that it's going to inevitably go in through editing and all that wonderful stuff. So what are the things that you're paying attention to out there when you're writing up a novel?
Wouldn't it surprise you if I said I don't really go in with a plan in mind. So the way my mind works, especially when it comes to coming up with the idea, it's like random sparks. You get the idea for some random thought in the cloud. In this particular case, it was a song lyric that I had stuck in my head, and I went, that'd be a good name. So I spiral from there, and then typically what I do is I create characters first, and I go, okay, how do I want them to get across? How do I want to build them? Then I build that first, I build the world first, and then after I do that, I kind of look at what I've been doing recently in terms of either books I've read, games I've played, because those are really like the two main things I grab stuff from. And I kind of look at how everything else is framed there in terms of attracting people with story, because that's what I like to focus on. In terms of what I look for in books, because I also find that this is what grabs kids a lot more often too, is that if they can invest themselves in something that's interesting and intriguing to them, they're definitely going to be far more interested in actually completing the book.
Yeah.
And it kind of works the same way from the writing standpoint, because if I'm not interested in what I'm writing, then why the hell am I writing it? I'm not going to just write it to write it. I'm going to write it because I enjoy writing it. So, and even from a writing standpoint, I could literally rattle off so many different scenes I have written that weren't even intended to be that way, but I thought, hey, what if I just did this instead? And that instantly makes it so much more interesting. Like, it's like the small things. Like, what if we went left instead of going right? What if we went up the hill and we didn't use a sled? Like, you know what I mean? It's like all of the small things that you want to build to get better ideas and something that's interesting enough where it's interesting for you to write, that hopefully comes across as interesting to read. I don't know if that answers the question, but
it does. It actually...
Because the way my writing process works is like, I've had people ask me, how do you do that? And my genuine answer is, I don't know. Because there's so much that goes into it.
It's actually closer to what my answer would have been than I was expecting. Actually, it's a lot closer to what my answer would have been than I was expecting. Throws me off just a little bit because most of the time when you think of writing a novel or you're thinking of writing anything larger, most people are talking about, well, I wanted to have a good this, a good that. And I thought about this really long and hard time, so I wanted to make sure that there weren't any holes or anything in it.
Mhm.
So, like, for a historical standpoint, when we're writing, we have a very... Okay. I say this because it is the best way for me to describe what it's like to write as a historian. I'm not poking fun at anybody or anything like that, but literally, historians will get just spur of the moment ADD when they start writing on a subject, and it's not even on purpose, because what tends to happen is we want answers. Historians want answers. We don't like questions. We hate questions. We like answers. We like
that's like the
giving answers.
opposite of like someone who loves literature, because they love questions.
Right.
Love questions.
But the thing of it is that we hate questions so much that we think of questions to answer. And it's one of those things. So one of the things that I actually caught, there's actually a text on my reading list that does this. That's a very fine example of them doing this, and it's the text by Leslie Gelb that's on the list. It's The Irony of Vietnam. And what it's doing is Gelb fills in so many holes that he wasn't even there for some of the holes that he fills in. He actually goes back and references into the source material to look into some of the things that that he's talking about, and he's not necessarily wrong, but when it was being written and composed, there was so much fascination with the fact of, Vietnam War X, Y, and Z, but X, Y, and Z contributes to A, B, and C, which contributes to D, E, and F, which contributes to G, H, and I, and it keeps on doing this thing over and over and over again, to the point where now this book that should have been maybe 150 to 200 pages, because it's about the irony associated with the Vietnam War, as Gelb was trying to present, but it expands so much to where it becomes a survey of the Vietnam War. It's no longer a text that's explicitly about one thing. It's now about a million other things.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about it, it being a Sparks thing, with you and how your ideas are coming about, it's kind of how it works for a historian, except we're spur of the moment, and we are literally looking for reasons to make more Sparks. We have a very hard time keeping our focus.
Because if I can just rattle off for a little bit, because the reason why, because even when you're talking about like just looking for more Sparks, that snowball effect of we're going to keep going, because that's literally the process I have with this one. So this one, I know it's hard, it's going to be wild if I say it this way, but we're in July of 2021 right now. I had the idea for this come up in January of 2021. So I came up with this early in the year. I kind of played around with it. Like, I would basically spend my lunch breaks at work basically just writing ideas on my phone and go just breaking things up, because like I was saying before, I take my inspiration from everything that I've either seen before, games I've played, stories, and everything like that. And I kind of just go, okay, what if we had this idea? And we just threw it out on the table and then just broke it apart completely, but then pieced it back together in a different kind of form. So I basically, this sounds really scatterbrained, but I just kind of keep snowballing it until I can get to a point where, okay, this is big enough, let's put it on paper.
Sure.
So I do that same thing where it's like, I need to focus, I need to get it done. Hopefully my brain doesn't run out of steam, because it tends to do that with some of my projects. Some of my projects haven't gotten further than 10K.
I'm
This
just
one
gonna,
is currently at like 31K, roughly.
I'm just gonna tell you that's not a you problem. That's
Yeah,
an everybody problem.
but because I was thinking to myself, I was like, I really hope I don't run out of steam with this because I really love this project. But like from a creator standpoint, it's like you need things to be interesting enough to you, and if that means deleting your last 3 chapters to make it better so that it makes you more interested in actually writing it, then if it's interesting to write, hopefully it's interesting to read. And that's just kind of like the thing you go for as a writer.
Right. See what I did there? But I'm sorry. Anyway, so, and we're gonna swing back into the reading component here. But one of the things that I want to ask, since I got both of you here, this is a side note, and I'm actually going to use the advice that I get you, and hopefully it'll help somebody else that's out there. So, I told you what my audience is generally when I'm writing, but say for example that I had really, really thick material or topics, something along that line. I water it down to the very basic things. These are the key points that I want to make sure that anybody who ever reads anything that I'm putting out about this subject, this is what they take away. Going down into the elementary age or the early middle school age of students, what are some ways to kind of break down? So I'm going to ask you both to go into your mind and remember your college textbooks, for example.
Oh dear.
All right.
Not all that far.
And think to yourself, how could I make some of the content that's in these textbooks palatable backwards into much younger age brackets? Like, what if I watered this down to the very basics? How do I make it work for the younger generation?
This actually reminds me, I had a psychology textbook in my spring semester senior year. So literally just this past year. And we had a textbook, and as a college student, I'm telling you right now, literally 21 years old, I was looking at this textbook and I had no idea how to read it. It was a psychology textbook for adolescent psych or child psych, and I had no idea how to read it. And personally, I feel like the reason why is because they focus on all of these really large words that give absolutely no context for. So I feel like if you're going to take, if you take a college level book and you strip it down to its basics and you don't go too far in depth, then it should be, keyword should be, easier for younger students to read. You want to break it down to its absolute core. Get rid of all the jargon that you're not going to need. Just give me basic vocab words that are easy to understand. Because once you get the basics, then you can go into, okay, like, take science, for example. If you're going to talk to me about earth science, don't talk to me about all the processes that go on underneath the volcano if we're talking about it in 6th grade. Tell me about the lava, tell me about the magma, tell me about the formation of the rocks, the different types of rocks, stuff like that. You want to break it down to the very basic material before you get anywhere else.
Right.
Yes. Absolutely. It's all about sticking to the basics, because you try throwing anything extraneous, that's when not only your students have to start going off topic, but you also go off topic, and then you just kind of go back to snowballing. You just kind of snowball the topic itself, and you end up deep diving without getting the basic fundamentals down about the subject. So I think...
So what you mean to say is I shouldn't use the word aerothermodynamics?
Exactly.
You can use the word flying,
but explain
things.
it. Don't expect anyone to pick up on it. That's what we're saying.
Yeah. It's interesting. Recently, I was teaching some preschool students, so like 4-year-olds, yeah, about the
Tiny.
word. Yeah, they're so tiny, so small, so
small.
cute. Sometimes they keep getting out of their seats. Anyway, one of the big terms, big in quotes, we used was paleontology because we were talking
Ooh.
about dinosaurs. And the thing is, if the kids are interested in it, they're going to devour literally everything they can.
Oh, for sure.
And so, as like Casimir was saying, like the vocabulary is super important. Those kids were nailing down paleontology so quick because they're like, "Yeah, that's a dinosaur. I like dinosaurs. I'm gonna be a paleontologist," and they were using it so much. I was like, "Yes, you know the word. Now you become paleontologists."
I was
Yeah,
gonna
I feel like
say,
it's so.
I was gonna say, a
gonna say-
paleontologist. Isn't that the person that studies pails?
Hmm,
Oh man, I wish I got an answer like that. That would have been fun to say, but alas.
that was yeah.
Sorry,
That
Min.
would be a good answer.
Sorry, Midnight. Go ahead.
No. No, I was gonna say it's weird when you talk about vocab, especially for like the younger kids, because the only time I really got a chance to teach vocab, which sounds really sad because I haven't got a chance to actually teach anything in, was for my student teaching when I was in the very beginning of my senior year. I worked with ninth graders. And we were doing a whole bunch of vocab, and like there's definitely a place when they're going through the grade levels where that interest in words just absolutely stops. Because, and I think that's part of the reason why, and I know I love English, I know I love teaching English, but I also feel like that's one of the most difficult things about English is getting people to be as excited about vocab words as you are. Because I say it all the time, I'm like the biggest word nerd. Like, I memorized words for fun as a sixth grader. That was my idea of fun in sixth grade. I memorized words. Like, I could tell you that the longest word in the English dictionary is numino ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis, but no one else is going to take the time to learn that word. Just me. So
Hold
Can you
on, I
type-
learned that word.
Can you type that in chat, please?
I can. Hold on.
You got this.
Real
That's
quick.
super-
Sometimes I question the intention of some of those texts when they don't accurately get their point across.
There it is.
At what point is that a failing of the student or the source? Holy shit.
I memorized that word in sixth grade because I was the only one who actually cared enough to do it.
Jeez. So, to deviate totally and gloss over that word, since I'm now foaming at the mouth because I asked you to type it, and I don't know why I asked you to do that.
Thank you, chat, for acknowledging it.
To answer your question, kind of real quick, the word no ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis, that is a condition you get from inhaling volcanic dust.
Mhm.
It's a disease from that, I believe.
Wow.
Yes, it is.
All right. But to answer the question that Sunbro brought up, when is it a point of a failed reader? I'm not going to say student because it isn't necessarily a student that's reading it. A failed reader or a failed text. It kind of depends.
Yeah.
And here's kind of where it depends. Is it relevant? So if I were to take this text and I were to look at it through the scope of someone who knows this field, is it relevant? Does it make sense? The answer to those questions is yes. It's probably a reader issue, and that's okay. That's okay. That's not a you problem. It's when I say it's a reader fault, it doesn't mean that you are necessarily a problem in that equation. It just means that you don't have the information readily available to get out of that text what the text wants you to get out of it. Now, if the answer to that either of those questions is no, the chances are you have what I like to call a Doctor Syndrome author. What is a Doctor Syndrome author, you might ask? Well, my dear chatters, a Dr. Syndrome writer is a person that is suffering from the delusion that since they have a PhD, they are an expert in everything and are a cut above you in education. And they are going to try and take out all the stops to make it seem like they are a cut above you. And I've got news for you. It makes them look stupid.
You know, I
Eggs.
definitely feel like my psychology textbook was that definition because I
Yes.
couldn't understand anything in there, and like I consider myself relatively smart. I'm like, yeah, I can read my textbooks like a couple of nights before the lesson and understand what we're talking about. I had absolutely no idea what I was talking about.
Yep.
Like
So-
I looked at those words and I was like, I don't know what the hell this is.
Yeah, so we have a couple. We have the doctors, the wannabe doctors, or the doctors that have Doctor Syndrome, and then we also have the decimal point profession individuals. So we talk about them in history. We call them decimal point historians, and basically what they are is if you say that something is 0.73 instead of 0.72, they're gonna flip their shit. When we're talking about inches, 0.73 inches. Well, it was actually 0.72 inches. Okay, nobody fucking cares. It was 0.7 to 0.8. Guess what? It's close enough. Well, no, it's not. Yes, it is. Shut up. So
That was the job.
so yeah, and part of the problem is that there is a superiority complex that's attached to academics these days, and while we are focusing a lot on people getting education, we're not focusing on them getting A, the right education, and B, projecting that education in the way that it was meant to be projected. It's being used as a superiority card. And I'm not going to get on this soapbox, because I will get on a soapbox if I keep going with this. But the bottom line here is that your education does not make you superior to anybody. It makes you more versed in subject matter. And when you come across a text that literally it could have been used in less words, or it could have been used in simpler words, that's another thing, and that's where Midnight was coming from with the talk about the psych book. And I have found that psych books tend to be like that anyway. So if it was worse
I learned that
than,
the hard way.
yeah, if it was worse than the average psych book, then it was especially bad.
God, $250 like down the drain. That's another thing about education. If you go for higher education, it makes you broke.
Yeah, it does do that.
100%.
But so yeah, it's one of those things. Just kind of keep that out there. A good historian or a good linguist, or what I guess you would call him, a good writer, a good teacher, a good instructor, a good political scientist, whatever it is, they don't need to use the big words, because they have mastered their craft in such a way that they can convert those words into words that people will understand and use. Which ties right into one of the things that you need to look for when you are building your reading list, is you need to look at how people use vocabulary.
Can confirm as a writer.
Yes.
Can confirm.
Yes. Because I will tell you right now that if you also have to pay attention to what kind of a writer, because I'll tell you right now, the way that I would write for the Army is not the way I would write if I were writing for a publication on my own. Because if I'm writing for the Army, that means I have to write it in a way that uses certain terminology that I wouldn't necessarily use otherwise. So you have to look at things like that too. Are you the intended audience of the text? That's another important thing. So if I'm writing,
Yeah, I was
something
about to say that too.
yeah,
That was like one of the main things we were taught in like my education classes, is to make sure that all of the texts are like age level appropriate.
Yep.
So like if they are the intended reader, like if this kind of text was made for them, like even just like fiction books, at least in the case of like an English class, like different nonfiction, fiction texts, graphic novels, because those are being used more too. Are they age appropriate for the grade level that you're teaching? If yes, chances are they're the intended audience, which means that they'll grasp the information a lot better.
right. And a lot of those PhD writers that are writing just to have their quota met, or the PhD writers that are writing just to have that cut above, they don't think about that. And what tends to happen is people will think that they have a grasp and understanding of subject matter because they read it, but they didn't understand it. But they'll still think that they did, which is extremely dangerous. It's actually more dangerous than if they didn't know anything. So you want to be really careful when it comes to things like that when you're building a reading list. Now, we've had this wonderful talk about writing. And the big reason why I wanted to make sure that we talked about writing is because writing has so much to do with how you construct your reading list. It needs to be relevant. It needs to be composed and geared properly, or else it really doesn't belong on your reading list. Now, I have multiple reading lists, but I tend to usually default to my military reading list, military historian. But then I also have a separate reading list called Things That You Should Have or You're Not a Historian list. And I've talked about two of those texts. And the first one is the Chicago Turabian Manual and Strunk & White's Elements of Style are on that list. If you don't own them, you're not a historian. Yes, if you don't own either one of those, you're not a historian. Sorry.
Well, I guess I'm not a historian.
Yeah.
I guess I am one.
So it's and that's my definition, and I kind of hold to that. Is that you should have access to those. But then I have my typical reading list. So I have things like I have a lot of Strachan texts. I have one text that is a staple for almost any modern military history archive, and that is For the Common Defense. So that's a survey text. Actually, that's Elements of Style. I'm looking at Yang's chat. For the Common Defense is a survey text. It's okay to have survey texts in with your stuff as long as you understand they are survey. They're not going to go into the depth that you might necessarily need. So what I would like to do at this time, and we'll start with Midnight, actually. Midnight, what would you say are your top 3 on your reading list? That
In terms of
if you were to talk to somebody who's going into your same profession, say these are the 3 books that I recommend the most that you read, what would you say those 3 are?
What really sucks is that I've read so many freaking textbooks, and I have some of them with me here, and I can't say I have 3, but I do have one that I really enjoyed reading.
Okay.
Only issue is I can't think of the title off the top of my head, which sucks because my memory is fleeting. So I remember reading one, and basically I can tell you what it was about. It was basically about how, I think it was about classroom management is basically what it was. And it was about how to organize your classroom so you don't run into those problems in the first place, because a lot of classroom management problems that you might run into really are a matter of classroom organization gone wrong. So all of the textbooks I read were mostly how to handle a classroom, how to keep a classroom, rather than how to look into text.
Okay.
But if we're talking also about texts that I enjoy also breaking down for my lesson plans and stuff like that as well, if I can actually find the textbook, I'll put it in chat somewhere. But I always find, as much as I'm one of the few people who actually hates this book, but I find 1984 to also be a really good book to use with students.
I love it.
Because
love
it hits them
it.
so different. like I hate the book mainly because like I know what the ending is. I understand the ending, but
Right.
like it rubs me the wrong way. Like I don't like it. I get it, but I don't like it. I get the point. But it's a good book to read, especially with the older kids, especially like once they're like 9th grade, 10th grade, because then they start getting the whole like, man, things are kind of whack. Like this is kind of messed up.
Yeah.
Like they can catch on to those things, and it's so fun to just watch the gears turn, and they go, wait a minute, that's not right. We shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
And then you get to the ending because they think one thing and they see
Yeah.
it. Like,
Like I've seen so many of their faces just look at me like, huh? And I'm like, yeah,
I think what
kind
I
of
like.
messed up.
I think what I like the most about 1984, and I also highly recommend Atlas Shrugged, but I think what I like the most about 1984 is it will never stop being relevant, and it's relevant in almost every single discussion. Because I remember we did a comics course in undergrad, and we
I posted it
did
in chapter roll.
and
There we
we
go.
did The Watchmen.
Oh, I've
Uh,
heard of that one.
And all that we were doing is we were just like pulling out 1984 references just all over the place. And my instructor was sitting up there just like, I can't believe this whole entire class, every single one of you had your own 1984 We did. We were a class of 26 students, and every single one of us had our own 1984 spin on it.
Yeah, I read that book I think in like 9th or 10th grade, along with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, another book that I dislike, but I love to teach. Because there's so many morality questions, but it's so good.
very
Mitosis
much.
It's so good to teach.
Recommending Roald Dahl. Yeah, I've heard of that from some of the writer friends that I have.
Matilda.
The
I
Dahl
think.
book I've read is Matilda. I think
Yeah.
that's the only one I've read, but I need to look into more
It's-
of those, to be
It's
honest.
the only one that I've read too. And yeah, Sunbro, you do. I think
You should read it.
yeah, that's a text everybody really should read. So
Alternatively, I also just realized I have a giant book of like Edgar Allan Poe's stories that I actually need to read at some point. So that's actually on my reading list. In terms of things I need to read.
right.
So what we're hearing is Edgar Allan Poe stream from midnight.
Oh,
right.
listen, I could talk about Telltale Heart all day long. I wrote a whole like 5-lesson plan for that one.
Nah,
Didn't get a chance to teach it though, so that kind of sucked.
rip. I feel
Yang,
that
it is your turn. Top three.
though. Oh, top 3 books. If I had to recommend all these books, let's see here. I'm trying to think because recently I've been looking into more classroom managed books.
Okay.
Because during my education, a lot of the classroom management wasn't necessarily taught from a book. A lot of it was just taught in person. So you learn from experience there, but there's nothing explicitly written down. So I've been looking into those books. So I can't say I could find one just yet that I like. But in terms of novels that I really enjoyed, I personally enjoyed Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice for the wit.
Okay.
And there is another not necessarily education related book, but this book is called Boundaries. And it's a book about establishing, what you find okay, what you don't find okay, how do you establish that with other people. And I feel that, especially with teachers, we have a hard time setting up boundaries at times when it's like, can you do this for the student? How do you adapt for this student? What are you doing for this as well? Are you contacting the parent 20 times because their kid didn't show up on Zoom? And it's like, how many times do I got to text the parent?
Yeah.
It's like
1,000.
understanding.
1,000 times.
Honestly, though. So it's those. I think it's those two right now off the top of my head that I think I would really recommend.
So, my 3, I would start with James Lewis Gaddis's The Cold War: A New History. I would start with it mainly because that is going to tell you what other stuff in Cold War you would want to read. Gaddis is like my idol when it comes to Cold War historians. And any historian that ever watches this is going to know that name. Bonnie knows that name. So, I mean, any historian will know Gaddis's text. And it's an extremely important text. The next one that I have on my list is Mark Moyer's Question of Command. And basically, he looks at counterinsurgency going all the way back to the Civil War. And at least in my field, that is extremely important because from Vietnam onward, we went to almost entirely insurgency and war. So it's important to look at the broader picture when it comes to counterinsurgency and insurgency as we go forward and backwards. So Moyer does a good job doing that write-up. And the last one that I have here is David Clay Large's Between Two Fires. And
That title sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's basically what it is. This is people are always very confused when I make that recommendation, and they know what my profession is, because they're just like, well, you're a military historian, aren't you more interested in the war? Yes, which is why I recommend David Clay Large's Between Two Fires. Because 9 times out of 10, if you talk to me, I will tell you that World War I did not end, and World War II was just the second part of World War I. And Between Two Fires does a very good job at framing that. Because it is talking just pretty much about Europe in the late 1920s and 1930s. And basically everything that leads up to what happens in World War II. So hence Between Two Fires. You know, it's between World War I and II. Ho, 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 ho. So I recommend those. Those are my 3 that I typically go for. Because when you look at the broader spectrum, the big misunderstandings that I have identified within my profession are lack of ability for people to understand that we changed from walking in straight lines and opening fire on people to trenches to guerrilla warfare. So that's Moyer's text, which will help you understand that. Understanding that World Wars I and II were part of a larger issue that really didn't get resolved. And a lot of that was eugenics, hegemony, and racism. I actually wrote a paper in my undergrad that was about how racism was the only thing that was involved pretty much with disparities and disputes in World War II. It was my longest undergrad paper that I wrote before my capstone. I think it was 19 and a half pages at peak. And then the Cold War, A New History. Nobody, people are dumb as hell when it comes to the Cold War. They really are. People say stupid shit about the Cold War all the time. So that's why it's just like, that's a survey text that I recommended, but it's a text that'll help anybody really kind of understand at least a little bit better about the Cold War as a whole. So those are the 3 off my reading list. My reading list is actually publicly available. It is on the website. If you click on the library tab on the website, it'll actually take you to a list of books and texts that I have, and even has a few articles on there that I include in my reading list in my library that you can actually download and take a look at for yourself. Yeah, those are on the website. So, complex things. Now, a bad example. I'm only going to give one bad example because we're over on time tonight. One bad example of a bad history text. Of a history text that you shouldn't have on your reading list because it's a bad history textbook and you shouldn't have it. I have to actually pull up the name of it so I can hear. So I just had it. Oh no! It's not in my favorites anymore. Shit. I had it pulled aside. It was a text. It was a text that literally was like pages upon pages upon pages of how fantastic of a person Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee were, and how great of a general Robert E. Lee was. And
Interesting.
and it tried to pull citation off of his time as a lieutenant. No, he really wasn't that outstanding of a lieutenant either. And I mean, so Lee surveyed like up here and like where I live. Like if he hadn't have surveyed up here, we wouldn't probably have had as decent of a survey as we did, as soon as we did. That's true. However, that doesn't make him a good lieutenant. It doesn't make him a good commander. It also doesn't. And Jefferson Davis didn't know shit about shit either. So, just pay attention. Pay attention to your field. Pay attention. Is it an alternative take to what the mainstream is? You don't necessarily turn them away. You might read them for the sake of being aware. I actually read probably 2 or 3 chapters of that book before I put it down. I was just like, I can't read any more of this. There's no problems if you're reading them for the awareness. The awareness part isn't a big deal. But if you're going to start citing out of it to prove a point, if it's anything other than the contrary, you've got a problem. So don't start making points about how great of, something so-and-so was when the evidence clearly points to the contrary. That's just what I'll throw out there.
You're as good as your sources sometimes.
Well, no, it's not sometimes. You are as good as your sources. I mean, that's just true.
Yeah.
So, Yang and Midnight, I appreciate. Did you have any last minute stuff you wanted to talk about, cover, ask? Wanted to make sure that got brought up. Anything that I didn't cover?
Not that I know of.
The only Wikipedia thing I was gonna throw out was that as students, just read the bottom, read the references. When the references
Read the fine print, TM.
Yep.
Don't copy paste Wikipedia's link,
Yeah.
put it in your bibliography, and call it a day. Don't do that. Please don't.
Use it as a stepping stone, but not your actual assignment, please.
Correct. T will tell you when I was giving him homework assignments, I would yell at him if he gave me a Wikipedia article.
I always told my 7th graders when I was subbing for science, I would ask them, like, did we ask Mr. Google? And they're like, yeah, we asked Google, and Google gave us Wikipedia, and I was like, no. Look at the other links below.
Did you ask Mr. Google's wife? Google Scholar?
Yeah.
Well,
they're 7th grade. They don't know how to use that yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
So
They're not writing full scale papers yet. TM.
yet. But yeah, it is what it is. Let's see here.
Cousin Bing, Google's
Cousin-
mistress.
Cousin Bing.
Google's
Jeez.
mistress, Alexa.
Jeez, you guys. We got some quick ones in the chat tonight.
Their pet, DuckDuckGo.
Their pet, No, I thought their pet was Jeeves. Or Lycos.
Oh, yeah.
What was it? Lycos? Was that the one that always had the dog on the commercial? Lycos, go get it.
I think I
like-
like
I
it.
have no
Yeah.
idea.
But yeah, so the bottom line too is just be careful. Read more, be careful when you're reading, and stay vigilant. Always make sure that you're checking data, especially this day and age. It's so easy to put out garbage. This would be a very inconvenient time to remind you about the fact that we're sponsored by Known Host, and you could literally put up on the internet for like $3 a month that Hitler escaped to the moon on a spaceship, and he's still alive on the moon today building a giant laser that's going to blow up Mars. Like, you could do that. So I mean,
and people could use it as a source.
and people would use that as a source. Yeah, peer-reviewed over propaganda. The Tattooed Historian was right. Which also, how is it going, man? It's good to see you. Very good to see you. the plot to Sonic Adventures 2. um, but it is true. It doesn't take anything to get. It doesn't take anything to get a website published anymore. Which is why I've always been very careful about when I publish stuff on my website. I actually have a disclaimer that says, no, my sources aren't cited, but all of my sources are listed in the library. They're just not referenced in the document. And I've been trying to get better about that. I've been trying to make it so that there actually are inline citations. But it's one of those things, too, is that what I have found is that if you have an inline citation generally on an internet website, for some reason, and I have seen a few studies of this, an individual who sees an inline citation on a website is going to turn it off. If you read it in a document, in a PDF, they won't. They read it in a website, they will. What I have found is that part of the reason that they do that is because it is an unrecognizable character. It doesn't flow with the natural conversation that you normally see on a website, so people inherently think that it's spam.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where I had to read into, and I found because a citation looks so vastly different. So one of the things that I've been working on is making it so that if you hover over like a certain thing that I have cited, it'll actually pop up the citation. It won't actually display it in line. It'll show it when it pops up. So, he escaped Germany as basically living in Sicily. He wanted to go to the moon, but the rocket never worked. That ranks right up there with the people who insisted that he escaped to, what was it? He fled to Portugal before making it down to Brazil.
Oh, that's a new.
Yeah, that's Argentina. Yes, Argentina. Whatever. Hitler was an alien according to the History Channel. Yeah.
Oh man, the History Channel, where I too get all my history information. That's
yes,
100%
the best
accurate.
The best accuracy. History Channel.
FYI, if you guys ever see Big Rev Kev on, or when we do our drunk history on the 23rd, because he's going to be a guest when we do that.
Oh my god.
I want you guys to bring up Kevin's time working with the Hitler Channel, also known as the History Channel, because he actually did have he was on an episode of something that was on the History Channel. His museum that he worked was on there, and he was involved with some of the production of it. So,
ooh, story time.
Yeah. To be fair, nobody in their good mind cites the History Channel unironically anymore. They cite video games and metal albums instead. Yeah. There's a great meme. Actually, I'll share this with you real quick. Let me see if I can locate the meme. It's a fantastic meme. It's the kind of meme that I would circulate. I would definitely circulate this meme. It's also 100% accurate, which is kind of disgusting in its own way. Let me see. Let me find it here. I think I still have it in my main folder too.
Yeah. On a side note, chat, a lot of the things when you're looking at sources, when you're looking at references on the internet for anything, critical thinking is going to be your lifesaver, and critical thinking is also a skill that we always have to keep working on every day. Even
might I add that, and again to bring it back, context clues.
Yes.
Yeah.
If it sounds right, it probably has some degree of truth to it, but if it doesn't sound right, chances are you're not reading the right stuff.
Or if you're getting conflicting information, also check the context for each one. Maybe one
Also
of them
true.
is a different time period. Maybe it's with a different population. Maybe different variables were included. That's the word. I need words.
Here it is. I found it. That's the meme.
I'm on mobile, so I'm behind. I don't see it yet.
Oh, you will.
It'll pop up eventually. 'Cause
Yeah.
Twitch mobile sucks.
But that is 100% legitimate. Historically
That-
accurate History Channel.
Oh, I see it now.
Was that really on the History Channel?
Well, I mean, they're always talking about how the pyramids were built by aliens on the History Channel, so...
I wouldn't gonna put past them if they like actually put that on TV, but I hope.
I feel like most people wouldn't question it. I mean, if it's on TV, it has to be real.
Oh
Oh
my
man,
God.
don't you know everything on the internet has to be correct, right? I
Has
read
to
that on
be.
the internet.
I mean, that kind of goes back into it too. It's just like you can't. I don't know. So, do I want to say this? I think I will because I think we have a good enough crowd that I can say this. So once upon a time, THK's first exposure to the interwebs was to a conspiracy theory website.
Did you have this a tinfoil hat?
I did not have a tinfoil hat. But it was one of those things where I'm just like, yeah, there's probably some really weird shit out there. Which I stand by. There probably is some really weird shit out there, but it's probably nowhere. It's either a lot more than what we're thinking of, has nothing to do with what we're thinking of, or it's a lot less than what we're thinking of. But I used to be a member on a conspiracy theory website, and I bailed around the time that I started working or started my undergrad because it's just like, no, none of this shit makes sense anymore. It really doesn't. And I have to be careful. So one of the things that comes to mind is the recent declassification on the UFO stuff.
Oh yes.
They are not saying that it is from another world. That's not what the government is saying, and I don't believe it for a second if they actually did come out and say that. All a UFO is, it's an unidentified object that happens to be flying. That's literally what that means. So, yeah.
I do wonder how they got associated with aliens, though.
Because
Like, I do wonder.
Because it was flying in the air and it wasn't able to be identified, so, you know, it's gotta be aliens.
Fair.
But it that's not what it is. I highly doubt that there has ever been contact. But that's just me. But again, I'm looking at the data. I'm looking at the texts. I'm looking at all this stuff, and I'm just like, yeah, no. None of what you guys are trying to sell makes any sense. It doesn't work in this light. Sorry. I know that you want it to, but no. Doesn't work. Try again. But then we have people like the professor that show up, and he's clearly an alien, so I don't know. But
I think the important thing about that information is just being aware of what's in it, and you can share conclusions about the data you see in it, but be aware that everybody's going to make different conclusions from it at times, and the accuracy of it for some people is not like accurate for them, because everybody wants it to fit like their own narrative.
yeah.
If that makes sense.
Well, people are weird, so
People be weird.
people
That's
are
just the conclusion for every conversation. People are weird.
yeah, and it definitely is. Checkmate, Lincolnites. Nice. I'll have to take a look at this. But yeah, there's you have to be careful was the bottom line of all that, though, guys, that you really got to be careful with what it is that you're reading. So always scrutinize everything, be critical. And you know what? I've said this before too. You can find something in a subject that a PhD may not have detected. tomorrow I could be told by a 9-year-old something that I had never considered before.
This is
With-
true.
It
This
is
is true.
That is not outside the realm of possibility, and people need to stop thinking that it's impossible, because it is absolutely not. And that's part
Oh
of the
my
problem.
god.
That's part of the problem with PhDs. They seem to think that they've got it all figured out. Well, little Timmy over there is thinking of things in a practical sense, because that's his understanding of the world, is that things have to be practical, logical, and they have to go in a linear motion. They don't have to be complicated. And sometimes, when we know so much shit, we try and make it more complicated than it actually is. So, for the love of God, pay attention and don't write everybody off, even if
Yes.
you don't agree with them. That is why I
Yes.
don't get that pissy when people come up to me and talk to me about the climate change stuff. I don't get that pissy about it, because if there's a 1 or 2% chance that they might be right about something, I don't want to write that off. I don't think that they're right, but
Well,
They
I
imparted-
had a couple of ninth graders actually correct me one day because I was teaching them about poetry, and you were talking about meter or something like that, and I completely like blanked on my own terms, and they were like, "No, I think it's this." So we all like had like a group Google, and we found out that like my kids were right, and I was like, "Y'all are out here like,
Yep.
like
Right.
it always bugs me when people like write kids off for not having information or like not being smart enough. And it's like I never understood that mindset, because it's like I learned so much from like so many of my kids.
mm-hmm.
Like it never made sense to me. But
Well, and this
I don't know.
This ties back in something that Tattooed Historian was just here. This ties back in something that he and I have talked about before, and I've seen him talk about it a little bit more on Twitter than I have. But it ties back into this thing too of we kind of get black sheeped in our profession. So like he and I are a little bit of black sheeps in the way that a museum director doesn't see the worth in Twitch. A senior historian doesn't see the value in Twitch. Well, that's for video gamers. We don't have anything that fits it because there's no education category. And yes, Twitch needs to have an education category. But we get written off
Agreed.
because we're trying to pander. That's what they see. You're trying to pander. Isn't that really what you're supposed to be doing, though, in education? You're supposed to be trying to inject it into to things to help people learn, to bridge that gap, to build these things, build bridges to help people understand a wider array of subject matter.
Yeah,
Um,
you would think, but
it-
you know,
And it shouldn't matter what your mode is to do that, as long as you aren't bringing a negative light onto the profession by doing so. As long as you're being stewards of your profession, shouldn't matter to you. Should not matter. I highly encourage anybody who is here that has interest. There was one talk that John did. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. I'd have to take a look at who exactly it was that he had on. I tuned in for the very end of it. But there's another historian that's out there running around that's doing stuff, and they're focusing on, I believe it's Civil War era. And the talk and the discussion was just absolutely fantastic. And again, it ties back into the thing of we're trying to do the same thing, but you have to try new things. If you want to stay relevant, you have to change, and it doesn't mean you have to get rid of the old, but you're going to have to adopt some of the new. And we're going through struggles with that right now at work too. So you have to adopt the new thing. So
And if only the admin at schools knew how to adapt.
yeah, the old thought that age equals wisdom. Yes, and I will tell you that nobody is worse at that right now than the 45 plus bracket of the arts and sciences programs. They're terrible. They're absolutely awful. They are either so up their own ass about age equals wisdom, or they are so loosely tied to it that they make bad decisions. Like there's no in between. It's either no, we're not doing anything, or oh god, well, let's try everything. Can't do either one of those. Both of those is bad. Don't do that. So, but one of the things that was nice is really, and it's weird to say, use that word in conjunction with what I'm about to say. That was one of the things that was nice about COVID-19, was that it forced a lot of those people to realize, hey, we're fucked if something like this ever happens again. So we have to think of new ways. Well, what's a new way? Well, what if we start streaming content? What if we make education accessible? So, yeah, there have been some transformations. I don't agree with all the transformations, but I'm not supposed to agree with all the transformations. You're not supposed to agree with all the transformations. You're supposed to disagree with some of the things that I think. And you're supposed to agree with me on others. It's one of the things that I've often said, that you shouldn't agree with everything that I say. You shouldn't agree with everything anybody says. You should disagree with find at least one thing to disagree with somebody about. So,
Growth comes from disagreeing at times.
yes, THK tends to yeet people who disagree, though. No, well, yes and no. Yes and no. There are times when people post a disgusting Usopp emote in chat that I will have to yeet them. But somebody disagreeing with me because I have a different stance on how education should go is not a reason I'm going to yeet you. I'm going to yeet you because you're doing a dumb thing. I'm not going to yeet you because I think that one of your opinions is not in line with what I think. It's not what I do. So,
Yeah.
well,
It's gonna. Dang. I was gonna say, in relation to the pandering thing, how adapting to Twitch and other streaming services, we started using more education. I mean, education in general has been moving towards technology-based things. I think a few websites are developed just strictly for education. I'm trying to think of a few off the top of my head.
I mean,
Brain
there's one that
Pop.
we use. Edpuzzle is a great one.
Ooh, I haven't heard of that
Edpuzzle
one.
is so good.
I need to use that. I'm gonna look it
If
up
you
now.
haven't heard of it, basically what it is that you get to assign your students videos, and it asks them questions throughout the video. But the good thing about it is that it tells you how far into the video that they got. So each kid is responsible for their own individual video. So they can't pull we watched it together. No,
Nah,
I asked you to watch it separately.
yeah, and you'll know.
And you know how many questions they got wrong, how far into the video they got, if they even watched the video. So
Oh,
it's very useful.
I'm gonna bookmark that now. I'm always looking for new education tools. I'm trying to think, like Flipgrid. That's a site that kids use to make videos. Padlet, where another site they use to upload. Seesaw. There's just so many different online resources. So when we have these old styles of thinking where it's like, nah, we need to get kids off the technology. Well, yes, there is like a point of limiting how much we do in the classroom. Like, we're not going to put on whole episodes of PBS on for them. But the idea that we should completely remove technology or limit it heavily is kind of outrageous to me when we have so many resources that we can use to kind of elevate, in a way, their education. So, like creating videos about science or using videos to help them create like number stories or creating like stories about letters and these kinds of exploratory things that allow a new learning way, I guess. A new, not a style. Learning style is a whole nother thing I could branch about, but
Yeah.
getting them to see it in a different way and helping them kind of understand it instead of just a typical, all right, let's sit at a desk. Here's a lecture. Here's a worksheet. And
Read this shit.
here, read this, guys.
So,
But yeah,
I think this is the longest I've had a Pokemon on my stream.
I mean, no one complained.
No, nobody did complain.
Listen, Pichu is a great sight to look at. Adorable.
So,
Heartwarming.
what's Pichu's favorite book?
Oh, God. That's a good question.
Is it
That is a very good question.
is it Chicka Chicka Boom Boom?
Uh,
Please tell me y'all know Chicka Chicka Boom Boom.
Oh, I do. I grew up.
Okay, thank you.
I was laughing. I was like,
okay.
oh,
I was concerned.
no,
okay.
no. God.
Do they still read Chicka Chicka Boom Boom in school?
we read it. Yeah, if we get the opportunity, we can. It all really depends on the teacher. I personally like the story, and so I would use it.
Now,
But
do you
other
read do you read the short version or the long version? Because there's
Good.
two Chicka Chicka Boom Booms. There's the short one that just has the alphabet, and then I think there's one that has isn't it like the alphabet in reverse or something? They all go up the
Oh,
tree and then they all come
yeah.
down the tree or something.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Ah.
I have the...
Lonnie, that's a good comment. I like that. James and the Giant Pichu.
Oh, jeez. So-
I love it.
use both. James and Giant Pichu. Ooh, that's good. Ooh. All right, we gotta get some art on that. James and the Giant Pichu.
Who,
Yes.
Yeah,
And
who
then
wants...
tag me in it because I would be the one most looking at this.
So this is going to be a community writing effort. I wonder what historical piece we'll put in it. We could do something really bad, like saying the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand was the cause of Pichu ever being born.
That would make me so sad.
I mean, I'm not wrong. That's what's even
No.
worse.
Yeah, I know. I know.
I could have made it worse. It'd be just like, yeah,
God, no.
tentacles, they wouldn't exist.
God.
All tentacles ever would not exist.
Never ever.
But no, so yeah, I grew up on Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, Rainbow Fish.
Yep, still used.
Yep.
Although it's getting slowly phased out for other books, it seems. I can't say which ones I know off the top of my head, but I know Rainbow Fish is one I definitely want to use in the classroom.
Oh,
Frog and Toad, I
God.
want to try to use.
I remember those books. I read that in second grade, I think.
Yes, they're amazing.
So for anybody who is interested in children's texts, as much as I don't agree with the man, his politics, I don't agree with the man's politics, but I think he's a fantastic human being, and I love what he tries to do for education in Europe, particularly Britain. I highly recommend Mr. Meme himself, Michael Rosen. I highly recommend him. As far as when it comes to children's books. He's a fantastic writer, a fantastic storyteller, and I would encourage anybody that is looking for additional books for their children, in class or otherwise, to pick up try and acquire a Michael Rosen book. So.
Or Eric Carle. Eric Carle is also a classic.
Yep.
R.I.P. Rest in peace. A good author, an illustrator.
So, I think we are going to skedaddle right into Scarlet Nexus. We're going to take a quick break, so I'm not going to stop the stream. But I think we're going to get into Scarlet Nexus. I don't know if we're going to be doing an Overflow Friday Flex yet. I'm waiting for feedback. I'm waiting for feedback on that, but we are gonna cut over into Scarlet Nexus here shortly. Midnight and Yang, I
Yes.
appreciate it. I hope you'll both be back with us
Anytime.
on the 23rd when we do our fantastic day-long
Ooh.
stream that we're doing.
I will be on vacation that day, but I will try to pop in.
Hey, you
Yes.
know, if you want to just pop into chat, you can just pop into chat.
Oh, I
Perfectly
will.
fine. So,
Yes.
but yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And this was fun. And Midnight was actually here. Pico only had to be Midnight for 5 minutes tonight.
Yeah, I know. Look at that. I reclaimed
On a
my
roll.
spot. I've taken my role back, Pico. It's fine. You can give it back to me now.
Your check's in the mail, Pico. Your check's in the mail.
Okay. I accept said check and I will spend it on all of you. There we go.
No.
See, this is what he
Pico.
does. This is what he does.
Yes.
This guy. Always doing shit like that. But yeah, so we are going to take a break. I want everybody who is going to stick around for that, get up, stretch, take a break. For those of you who will be joining us again later, thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't followed, we're one follow away from 150. I'm just saying. And that's the last thing we need before I play Notice Me, Colonel Sanders, or I Love You, Colonel Sanders is what it's called.
Oh, God.
That's the last requirement that we need to have filled.
Jeez.
So if you haven't followed and you want to be 150, I'm just saying.
If you want to be the one that makes everything fall into pieces, do it now.
So yeah, that's the only thing that we're missing. But we'll keep stream going here as we slide into the next. And if we do end up doing an Overflow Friday Flex, we'll just cut into the Scarlet Nexus. It's not that big of a deal. So
Yeah.
I will let you two go. I think Pico's going to stick around and heckle me through Scarlet Nexus, though.
Would you like me to run an ad break through this conversion?
Yeah, because it's going to be probably a 5-10 minute break. So yeah, if you want to do that, go ahead and do that.
I will do a 1 minute ad break, but
Yep.
on your signal.
So appreciate it as always, folks. And we will see you. Notice me because I love you, Colonel Sanders Senpai. Woo woo.
He said it. He said the word.
He did the thing.
You don't have to play the song.
I can't. Also, I have changed it so that you actually have to redeem the Uwu song now. It is 150,000 channel points.
Oh my
See?
God.
And I will play the song. So, but we'll just make a note to cut the YouTube just before that happens.
Discreetly.
Discreet.
Very discreetly. Just you'll never notice it.
My gosh, what is this chat doing to me? My God. All right, guys. Well, hey, yeah, we are going to go ahead. We'll take that break now. And when we come back, we're going to get into Scarlet Nexus. Ladies, I appreciate you being here. Thank you again. If you want to stick around, feel free to do so. If you got other stuff going on, I understand.
Anytime.
And
Thank you so much for letting us on.
absolutely.
Yes.
All right, we'll catch you guys later or on Scarlet Nexus. Pico, I'll go ahead and have you run that. We're also going to jump into the other chat room.
Alrighty.
Yep,
Take care,
got it.
y'all.
Bye,
Later,
y'all.
guys.
Later, everyone.
Bye.
All right, chat. And with that, we are going to take a break. Go ahead, get up, stretch, walk around. When we come back, we're going to get right into episode 2. We now have a SAS counter, and Pico will set us up with that shortly. So stick around. We've got more stuff coming in just a few moments.